About consent and choice and how it impacts our decision making, financial decision making, of course, but all the other decision making as well, too. So this comes from a book called Strategies for Working with Involuntary Clients. So we're going to talk about consent and choice as something that is this only the little green bubble is consent. So we cannot, everything else we're going to talk about is not consensual. Consent is freely given. We have to be regulated to give our consent. Uh, the nerds would say that we are within our window of tolerance, and we are engaging in activities with a full knowledge of the consequences, processes, risks, and values. Um, if you take a step off of consent, so basically removing some choice here, now we're engaging in an activity with reluctance, and we're engaging in this activity to please or not disappoint somebody else. So this is where accountability lives. This is one of the reasons why when I'm working with a client, especially early on in the work, occasionally I'll be asked to be their accountability buddy. And I say no. And here in a little bit, you'll kind of understand why I say no to that. Even if they are asking me to, they're uh, theoretically consenting to this. It is the long-term outcomes of removing choice from ourselves in any form are typically not good. So, yeah, public declarations like posting on Facebook that you're going to do something like work out. All of those kinds of things are a kind of compliance, a kind of uh, accountability. Now we're moving a little more pressure, a little more choice, and we're into pressure. And again, we're engaging in an activity with reluctance through bribery, punishment, shame, judgment, manipulation, implied threats, or a sense of duty or a sense of responsibility. And this, a lot of work tasks live here, but a lot of home tasks live here too. A lot of parenting tasks live here. And again, we're removing a little more choice, and now we're into coercion. And this is where permission is not given, and we're engaging in an activity through the use of bribery, punishments, direct threats of physical violence or harm. And the last one, the most extreme one, is force. And this is specifically means of physical force. So this could be like when I was 5, my parents got sick of me not getting into the car fast enough and physically picked me up and put me in the car. That's considered force. We're not throwing my parents under the bus. Yeah, they're fine. They're great folks. So these are the correct terms. Uh, it, During coaching, I will often use compliance, pressure, for coercion, force, obligation, restriction. I will almost use those interchangeably, which truly is not correct, but just kind of what happens. But like this is the correct terminology. Compliance, pressure, coercion, force, and consent all mean something very different. So the reason I talk to my clients about this is that as we move from left to right and have more and more and more choice removed from us, we dysregulate. So on the left-hand side of the screen, with consent, we are fully regulated. And then I'm sure you can see as you move from left to right, we're getting more and more and more dysregulated. The reason that the social worker world talks about this is because they understand that they're often working with people who are not consenting, not fully consenting to be there. And what we all need to understand is that it doesn't make any difference to our brains whether or not we are removing choice from ourselves or somebody else or situation is removing choice from us. The pattern is incredibly consistent. So the idea is that as you move from left to right, you're going to see two behaviors tick up. Those behaviors are rebellion and resentment. And again, and I'm repeating myself intentionally here, it does not matter if you're the one removing choice from yourself, somebody else is removing choice from you, or a situation is removing choice from you. It doesn't matter. Our brains don't have a way of understanding the difference and they don't care. The rebellion and resentment looks like personality defect, like it looks like someone's acting out or um, have disproportionate reactions. It's not, though. Rebellion and resentment is the healthy, normal reaction to us having choices removed from us. So back to me being 5 years old, this would have been 1977, right? So imagine a Plymouth Fury about the size of a boat with no seat belts in the back. my parents are time pressured, right? So they were late for something. I don't remember what it was. It doesn't really matter. But you know how it takes kids 2 hours to get in the car? Well, it was taking me 2 hours to get in the car. And eventually they got sick of it and they just picked me up and put me in the car. And I responded with rebellion and resentment, a lot of it. I remember rolling around in the back seat screaming. And as deeply annoying as I grant you that was the healthy response for a 5-year-old, right? As we grow and we are socialized and we get those filters put in place, we may not externalize the rebellion and resentment, but it is still happening. We learn to internalize it. I had a very safe family. So I was safe to act like that at 5 years old, right? I knew that I was not going to get beaten, so I could externalize my rebellion and resentment. If for some reason I had been raised by people who would hurt me if I did that, I would not have externalized that rebellion and resentment and would I instead have turned it inside. So it's got to go somewhere. Anytime that we are making a choice or engaging in activity outside of full consent, there will be a price to be paid for that. And the price is rebellion and resentment and the things we're about to talk about next. Um, so as you see rebellion and resentment come up, which you should absolutely expect, you should see certain behaviors come down. The ability for long-term positive behavior change. This should say long-term positive behavior change. It just does, I just never fix it. Um, Long-term positive behavior change is kind of what I think we all want. That's certainly what my clients want from me, but it is not what we get if we remove choices from ourselves or from others. Um, we will get long-term negative behavior change as you go from left to right. You will get short-term compliance as you move from left to right, but you will not, guaranteed, you will not get long-term positive behavior change. We'll also lose the ability to keep ourselves motivated. Motivational willpower drop off very quickly. At least now, like it seems like the grind culture is starting to relax a little bit, and thank God for that. We've kind of been told in our productivity obsessed world that if you were serious about something, if this was important to you, that you'd have unlimited willpower and motivation. I hear this when I'm working with couples. Like, it doesn't matter if you don't feel like talking about money. If this was important to you, we'd be talking about money right now. That is just not the case. It happens in many other domains too, but we lose the ability for motivational willpower as you move from left to right. We also lose the ability for choice, to evaluate choice, to look for choice, which is, again, this is something our amazing brains do just sort of automatically, is that as you move from left to right, this is just a progression of the removal of choice. It would be really lovely if our brains, once they recognize that we have choice removed, were suddenly just magically able to look for more choice. Unfortunately, our brains will double down. So as we feel like we have choice removed from us, we will narrow our vision even further down. We will hyper focus down. That is a function of dysregulation. And again, none of this that I'm talking about is a choice. You are not deciding to do this. This is a reaction. This is an inborn default mode in our heads. And then the last thing that happens as you move from left to right is we lose the ability to kind of feel like we're a real person. That's the reason, maybe the main reason 5-year-old Hannah responded like she did, is because my parents basically told me that I wasn't a real person. I know that's not what they were saying, but that's the perception that we get. And I don't know if you've experienced this or somebody you know absolutely has experienced this, where we're in a relationship or a job that removes our choices. And after a while, people literally say the words, I don't know who I am. That lack of identity, that loss of identity, or the suppression of our identity um, is a natural result of having choices removed over time. The other thing that happens is as we should expect, some trauma. So this is low, lowercase t, chronic, all day, everyday trauma. This is capital T trauma like PTSD. I do think the word trauma is overused, but I don't think we can understate how much we can traumatize and re-traumatize ourselves. Just kind of walking around, removing choice from ourselves, restricting ourselves, and wondering why it's not working. one of the things that our brains do exceptionally well is double down. So, right there in pressure, if you look about two-thirds of the way down, shame and judgment. Shame and judgment is internalized rebellion and resentment. So, if I can't externalize my rebellion, like if I can't yell and scream, I'm going to internalize that. And that's what shame and judgment is. I'm punishing myself, I'm shaming myself. So, this becomes kind of a vicious cycle. Um, Yeah. So how this impacts our financial decision making, it's indirect in most cases, but very direct in others. And that is because we have been told in our culture in this time that restriction is the way to go. Um, it's the very first thing we try to do. We try to restrict our spending, restrict our desires. Um, deny ourselves things, and we don't really understand why it's not working. So we use that internalized shame and say like, okay, I'm not restricting myself enough, or I'm not restricting myself correctly. So we double down on the restriction and don't understand why we end up actually spending more. So the consent continuum is one of the reasons why we can restrict ourselves and actually end up spending more money, not less. Another domain where this is fairly salient is diet. Like we can stick to a restrictive diet for, I don't know, 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden we're going to rebound. We're going to rebel, right? I can keep to this crazy restrictive diet for 2 weeks, and then I just eat a whole cheesecake at some point. And both of those, whether like I'm not able to restrict myself perfectly, or I can't keep with this restrictive diet, it comes back to that shame and judgment. Like the message that we receive is what there's something wrong with me. What's the problem with me? And what we're not doing is evaluating the tools that we're using. That compliance, pressure, coercion, force, restriction, obligation, all of those things are just bad tools. And they are not the only way that we can get things done. So the idea is to take more of our choices and move them towards consent. We do not live, and we probably as a species have never lived in an environment where we have full consent all the time for every choice that we make. It's just not possible. We can maybe have a day of that, a nice day off where you just like do whatever the hell you feel like doing. But it is important to recognize that when you experience rebellion or resentment, whether it's your own sweet self or you're seeing this coming from somebody else, maybe you're in partnership with somebody and you're seeing that rebellion come back at you and the resentment that comes along with financial stuff sometimes, my encouragement is to view that in it's normal. And that if you're watching rebellion and resentment from yourself or from somebody else, it's an indicator that there's a sense that there's choice being removed here. So that's the consent and choice consent continuum. Thank you very much.